Hello and welcome to Hot Indonesia, the only English talk show in the world's fourth biggest country. I'm Dalton Tanonaka in Jakarta. Here is this week's H-I Hotlist. Riot reality, the global anger over a police killing in the U.S. We talk with attorney Kevin Smith in Los Angeles. Keeping the door closed. PSBB in Indonesian will be extended after nearly 2 months in place. And walk, not talk. A city in Japan will ban cell phone use while walking. Should we do the same? Okay, here are my co-hosts each and every week. Sandrina Malakiano, former TV news anchor, now a political marketing consultant from her home in South Tangerang. And Santiago Uno, business executive and former Jakarta vice governor from his home in South Jakarta. Here's hot topic number 1, riot reality. Protests in the U.S. began immediately following the release of this video from May 25th. It shows Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin kneeling on the neck of forgery suspect George Floyd for more than 8 minutes. Floyd died in that time, saying he couldn't breathe and calling for his mom. Those angered by this latest death of an African American by a white police officer filled the streets of American cities, followed by others in Europe, South America, and Canada, and others. The peaceful protests in some places turning into violent ones with injuries and property destruction. Kevin Smith is an attorney and former TV journalist who's worked in Japan and the U.S. He joins us now from his home in Los Angeles County. Kevin, thank you for joining us. Now, for more than a week, we've seen the pictures of angry street scenes in cities across the U.S. You know, there's a nighttime curfew where you live. Let's put this in perspective to start this off. Are the protests as wide as it seems, or is this a case, another case of selective mass media coverage and social media saturation?
Dalton, thanks for having me on. No, this is not overblown at all. In fact, I'm old enough, and I'll leave it to you to say whether you are, to remember 1968 in this country, which until now, I think most people have viewed as the worst year in American history since World War II, with the same kind of chaos. Then it was the Vietnam War, but Dr. Martin Luther King, the great civil rights leader, was assassinated, followed 2 months later by Robert F. Kennedy, who was running for president, assassinated. President Lyndon Johnson announced he was not going to seek re-election, and that opened the door for Richard Nixon and his Law and Order campaign. But the same sort of thing. There are multiple violent protests. Actually, let me rephrase that. The protests, by and large, are peaceful, but there's a lawless element of various kinds, some on the right, some on the left, and some just criminals trying to take advantage of the situation that are getting a lot of the attention, and a lot of that part is overblown. Most of the protests are peaceful, but it's as widespread as anything I've seen since 1968.
Okay, let's bring it a little closer to the future, Kevin. We do see real anger and people fed up with another Black Death at the hands of white law enforcement. You know, we have our own charges of discrimination with incidents in Papua, which is the east of Indonesia, eastern Indonesia. How strong is sentiment now compared to the LA riots in 1992?
Well, there are several big differences from then, and the main difference we have now, both in terms of the ability of any citizen now to capture this sort of thing, this sort of act, this sort of violence with just a cell phone or mobile phone camera, that is the huge difference, which is bringing a lot of this stuff to light. It happened a lot before, but just only in the last 10 years is it this widespread. And the second thing about the Rodney King incident, which was on the old-fashioned video camera, so at least we had that. That was very localized in a lot of ways to Los Angeles. It was considered a Los Angeles police problem. There were some outbreaks in other cities. But this is the culmination of several things over the last few weeks, not just Mr. Floyd's death in Minnesota, but there was another death of a Black man jogging in the state of Georgia a couple of months earlier, also captured by a videotape or a mobile phone camera. And on top of that, there's all this pent-up frustration from the coronavirus and anxiety and fear. Not to get too overtly political, but a president who doesn't seem to really be in control or have solutions in Donald Trump of exactly how to respond to either of these crises.
It seems kind of the perfect storm, right, Kevin? Okay, Sandrina, question for Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. Good to meet you. As you stated just now, mayhem overshadows peaceful demonstrations, and in such a chaotic situation, the presence of justice is needed, leadership is needed, and hearing what the president has been saying and seeing what he has or said he will do. How do you see, in your opinion, the commander-in-chief? Is he more part of the solution or part of the problem? And secondly, what steps needs to be taken to take the arc closer to justice?
Well, and again, I have my own very strong partisan political views, which is not the reason you're having me on the program. As both a lawyer and a former TV reporter, I try to be trying to be a little objective here. But this country was very divided before the virus hit and before these new videos of African American men being killed. So we had a president who thrives in Trump on basically dividing people, and he's been successful about that. We have there is a core of about 40% of the voting public that supports him strongly, whatever he does, and there is another equally vocal, perhaps even a greater group that is vehemently opposed, and it's all going to come to a head in this election.
Okay, Sandy, question for Kevin, please.
Well, Kevin, I hope you're safe and healthy there in Los Angeles. I'm very concerned looking at the coverage, the news. We were waiting for two big news, which is the COVID-19 updates as well as the launch of the SpaceX NASA collaborations, and suddenly this violence and the mass outpouring of people basically dominates the news. Now, I was devastated looking at the scenes, in particular in LA, whereby in Melrose, the Grove, people are really looting, torching. I want to ask you a question. In light of the economic distress caused by the COVID-19 and this additional difficult period of time whereby small and large businesses are being torched or looted, how likely do you think, and what type of rebound are you expecting in the U.S. economy following this?
Well, I think it's going to be slow. And frankly, Dalton and I used to cover business news in Tokyo some years ago. I think I'm frankly puzzled by the fact that the U.S. stock market seems to be doing fairly well after the initial plunge, because I don't quite see the basis for a short-term economic recovery. I mean, if you have 40 million people unemployed and a lot of businesses closing, I don't see consumer spending coming back really quickly. When restaurants reopen, and they're starting to, they were supposed to here in the Los Angeles area, in Los Angeles County, restaurants were given permission to reopen this week, and then all of a sudden they get slammed with this curfew. So nobody could go. I think it's going to be, and even when they reopen, it won't be at full capacity. There are restrictions that they can only have, 50% of the customers that they used to have. I don't see how this is, I think it's going to be a slow recovery. And of course, with the United States being a major economic power and a consumer of products from Asia, as well as an exporter of aircraft and stuff like that, I think it will affect the whole global economy. And of course, we're not the only ones affected. I don't want to be self-centered about it, but I think it's going to be a while.
Okay, last question, Kevin, to wrap this up. Is this an America-centric problem of protests and violence, or could it happen anywhere, even here in Indonesia, do you think?
Well, I think that's a really important question. And I'm not a historian by nature, but you look back to the start of World War II and what happened in Europe and Nazi Germany, and we have all the combustible parts for something like that could happen in almost any country. We have the the economic angst, the problem, people uncertain about their futures. The tendency then is to look for somebody to blame. Who do they blame? Immigrants, people who aren't like the traditional white folks who are running the country, at least in this country. So first, and then you have Trump sort of throwing gasoline on the fire. So first he was taking steps against Muslims, and then he was taking steps against Mexicans, and now the African American community feels underprivileged or underserved, and this can happen anywhere. Everybody's got a different mix, right? But you look at the elements in just as looking in Europe, Britain or France or Italy, and obviously over in Asia too. And I think that I do think economic instability plus racism equals totalitarianism, dictatorship, and I think that is a dangerous mix anywhere, and I hope it doesn't come to pass here or anywhere else.
All right, good point. Attorney Kevin Smith in California, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, Hot Indo will continue shortly. Keeping the door closed in the fight against the coronavirus. You're watching Hot Indonesia with Sandrina, Sandy, and me. Here's hot topic number 2, keeping the door closed. The governor of Jakarta this week announced that large-scale social restrictions, PSBB in Indonesian, will be extended after nearly 2 months in place. A schedule of gradual reopening of sectors will follow later, this while the number of infections and deaths have yet to show a sustained period of decline. Now, the impact to the economy has been devastating, so there is much pressure on the governor to end the restrictions. Sandy, is this what you would have advised your former boss to do, keep the restrictions in place?
Well, we still have to be definitely very cautious, as you correctly said, that reopening the economy is very important because we have more than 5 million people now, according to sources, have been put under terminations of employment. But it's still risky, and it is a real political dilemma for the central government as well as for the local government. As you see around the world, leaders make calculated risk by opening and then suddenly see numbers spike again. Mexico and other countries, Mexico opening but designated some areas for red zones. Singapore was opening up in starting early May, and then they saw a number of cases spiking up again. So I guess we need to be strategic in terms of when and which part of the daily life is going to be restored to normal. Definitely the one that public health risk is the lowest with the biggest impact to the economy, which is the small medium enterprises, traditional marketplace, not mall, but traditional marketplace, because SMEs create 97% of the jobs and it's 60% of the economy, and therefore we need to make sure that we stay very, very disciplined throughout this very difficult time.
Yes, Sandy, you speak about malls. In the plan for reopening, and there have been several lists published, malls are one of the first places that were open. But Sandrina, the leaders of mosques and churches complain.
Indeed, because it's been quite a while. Well, of course, the closure of mosques and churches were based on very logical reasons and considerations, because people tend to flock there and they get packed with people, which makes the spread of the virus very fast. And most of the cases that appeared or emerged in Indonesia in the beginning came from mosques or religious gatherings in many parts of the country. But aside from that, Dalton, I'm happy to know as a parent that the government has also decided to let all the schools remain closed So they decided that schools will not reopen until the end of 2020, until the end of the year, because parents have been really highly concerned about the safety and the health of children if they have to go back to school. And no matter what, all the decisions made by the government should be based on data. I'm quoting Sandy because he always underlines this fact, and I agree completely. Whereas in Indonesia, we are under-tested. Compared to other countries, we are seen as the lowest testing rate in the world. So all the numbers, the R0, the RTs, could be inaccurate because we are under-testing the people.
Okay. Air travel is another no-fly zone. That restrictions continue in that sector. But, you know, it's such an important part of our economy. Travelers to come here, they would need like a COVID-19 free letter and other documents. Very difficult to get sometimes. This is a critical segment of our economy, as I said. But, you know, other countries have been opening up, as we know, UK, US, Germany, and others. If we open and the numbers spike, you got to close it down. So maybe the governor did the right decision. Despite intense pressure, the numbers rose 43% in Jakarta in May. He's got to keep it closed, right, Sandy?
Yeah, and I think the health of the people is first and foremost of importance. And I guess the public health risk should be dealt, and testing, I have been advocating to have 30,000 tests a day at the rate the size of the city of Jakarta, and we just haven't been able to achieve those numbers. So I guess we need to be cautious. Let's be disciplined during this difficult time, maybe another 2 weeks, and then we hopefully reached the peak, and we've been able to see number of cases coming down.
Okay, and the fight goes on. More Hot Indo is ahead. Walk, not talk. Should we follow Japan and ban cell phone use on the move? You're watching Hot Indonesia from Jakarta. Here's hot topic number 3, walk, not talk. You see it all the time, people on their phones while walking and not realizing the potential danger. The Japanese city of Yamato near Tokyo is about to adopt a law banning cell phone use while walking. Officials say that will prevent accidents that are costly and possibly deadly. But there's no penalty attached to that law, more like a public awareness campaign. And let me just start this off by saying I witnessed this myself the other day, before the lockdown, of course, at the Senayan City Mall. I was following this guy. He was on his phone. The lower ground, they have the goldfish ponds. This guy walks right into the goldfish pond while he was on his phone. Big splash. He wasn't hurt. I tried to help him up, but that shows the possible danger of something like that. I say we should do it here too. Ban cell phone use while walking. What do you guys say?
Making phone calls, doing texting while you're walking is definitely dangerous. We're not designed to do multitasking, and especially when you're crossing the road. So I would make it really some city ordinance, and making sure that we have people to remind everybody that when they do that, they're risking not only themselves but risking others. So some cities have tried successfully, some cities have not. London padded the lamppost to make sure that when people hit it, it doesn't really hurt them. But I guess you need to remind yourself that this is two tasks that you should not be combining, because it's very dangerous.
Yeah, it's already illegal to drive while texting, so I think this is kind of common sense, right, Sanjina?
Yes, I agree completely. It's really dangerous, especially on escalators and staircases, because people have died because they lost focus during texting or browsing with their phones. Your question, Dalton, you said we should do the same here. It's not about should we do the same, but could we do the same here, because this requires discipline. And that is a big issue in Indonesia. There's so many rules and regulations have been made, but it's really hard to implement them here in Indonesia because of the lack of awareness, discipline, and law enforcement.
You have to have confidence in your fellow Indonesians, Sandrina. I give. I hope.
Well, you see what's happening during the PSBB.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. Let's take it a step further. I think there should be actually a phone-free day, kind of like car-free day for 24 hours. No one can have access to their phones in public.
Dalton, for me, I've witnessed it myself in our families. People are getting glued to their mobile phones more and more each day. And so we have made this rule, no gadgets on the dining table when we're having our meals, so we talk to each other. We need to be more present, and these gadgets are taking us away from each other.
All right, there you go. Okay, so you endorse my no phone-free day.
Yes.
If Sandy was still vice governor, he could make it law. It is feedback time now. We want to hear from you wherever you are or wherever you're watching us. Yvonne posted this on Instagram. Hopefully our country can implement employment protection loans to prevent massive layoffs in the future. Good suggestion. We must be prepared even while we are still in a tough time. And Oknum commented on the YouTube page of our partner TV1. We had 3 months to overcome this pandemic. Late measures caused us to suffer the consequences now. Here's how to contact us with your feedback. Email at hotindo@theindonesiachannel.com or comment through our Hot Indonesia or TV1 or Indonesia Channel Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages. Final words, Sandrina.
Yeah, we have witnessed recently, maybe because we've been cooped up for too long and people are just getting used to the situation. It's like people are now taking it as things are getting normal in a way, so they're letting their guards down. So I would just like to urge those of you watching this show, no matter what, we still don't know until when this will last, so remain vigilant, remain cautious, stay safe, stay home if possible, because it's still needed. The virus is still out there. Take care of yourself and your family.
Final words, Sandy.
I have my 2 daughters in the US, and I'm really concerned looking at the news reporting. Please, my 2 girls and all Indonesians and practically everybody in the US, stay safe and making sure that the protest is being carried in a peaceful manner. Secondly, I'm advocating for, as we are preparing to reopen some phase of the economy, for the government to work together with the banking sectors and with the SMEs to provide a working capital loan guaranteed by the government to help small businesses reopen their stores, reopen their businesses. Something like very accessible, maybe worth 2 or 3 months worth of working capital.
Okay, and my final words. I'm proud to hold an American passport, but what I've seen in my birth country in the past few weeks makes me sad and angry. Sad because people are dying unjustly, and angry that nothing seems to change in a time that seems so hopeless. We must all look at ourselves and ask what we must do to make things better. And that is Hot Indonesia for this week. For Sandrina Malakiano, Santiago Uno, and me, Dalton Tanonaka, thank you for watching, and please join us again next time.